Hello, and welcome to a Reigate Maths video on the algorithms chapter from the first year of the Decision 1 unit for the Further Mathematics A-Level. My name is Simon, and in this video we're going to be looking at the second of the two sorting algorithms. If you haven't yet gone to watch the video on the bubble sort algorithm, I would recommend you do that first because it's a little bit easier, and you can use it to get your head around what's going on. In this video, we're looking at the quicksort algorithm, which in its name, it is quicker than the bubble sort. It is a little more complicated in the way it works, and unfortunately, depending on which exam board you are doing, you may have to adapt this method very, very slightly, and I'll go into that in a minute. So how does the quicksort algorithm work? Well, much like bubble sort, it works by sorting a list of numbers into an order. Could be letters as well. We could be doing letters into alphabetical order, and in fact, the example that we're going to look at will be doing that. What we are doing is we are taking our list of elements and we're splitting the list into subgroups. The way we do that is we pick one of the numbers or one of the elements to be what we call a pivot. In the Edexcel course, we choose the midpoint of the list. So if we've got a list of 9 numbers, we're going to choose the one in the middle. The difficulty comes if you've got an even number of elements. Because if you've got 10 elements, you've got no midpoint. What you do is you pick the element to the right of the middle. So pick to the right of the middle. So if we have A, B, C, D, E, we pick the middle letter, because that is our midpoint. But if we have A, B, C, D, E, F, our middle would be here. We pick the one to the right. And you just need to learn that that's what you do to pick the pivot. In the grand scheme of the quicksort, where you choose your pivot doesn't matter. But again, for the Edexcel course, this is what you have to do. The next step is you then write down all of the items that are less than the pivot on the left of the pivot, and all the numbers that are bigger on the right. The key thing is making sure you keep the order of those in the super list, in the original list. So if, in this case, A comes before B in this list, so when we're sorting it, A would have to come before B when we put it into this smaller list. That'll make a little bit more sense when we look at an actual example. Once you've got your list into 2 sublists with the pivot in the middle, or the pivot somewhere, not necessarily in the middle anymore, you then repeat the process on each of those little lists. And then once you have chosen every item as a pivot, that's when you stop. So let's pause and look at an example. Now, with the bubble sort video, we did a numerical example putting things into ascending order. This one we're going to do an alphabetical example using words. So this is the example we're going to use. We're going to use the quicksort algorithm to sort the following teams into alphabetical order. Now notice how we've been told which algorithm to use. That will be consistent in the exam. You will be told, you won't have a choice. Now with these ones where it's words, you don't want to write out the whole words every time. So what we're going to do is before we even start, we're going to write them as letters. Okay, so we're going to do this. Now, sometimes, particularly if the letters are a little bit uncomfortable, they might give you the letters there. So, let's go through the quicksort algorithm on this list. So choose the item at the midpoint of the list to be the first pivot. We've got 8 numbers, so our middle is here. So we need to choose the element to the right as the pivot. Now, what the textbook kind of suggests you do is you look through the list and write everything down on the left first, and then write everything else, then write your pivot, then write everything else. You don't need to do that. You can sort of if you can look and go, well, I can see how many there are going to be, let's put this in the right place. That can sometimes be easier to make sure of this bit, keeping them in order, because that's the really easy bit to get wrong. So looking through the list, we can see that C and B are alphabetically before E, and then H, S, W, N, and L are all alphabetically after E. So E is going to go third in our list. So let's put it there. Now, we circled our pivot to show that in this pass, so in our first pass, we are considering E as our pivot. But once we've done our first pass, we know E is in the right place. So we are going to put a box around it to show that it's not going to move anymore. So now we go through our list. We can see H comes after E in the alphabet. C comes before E, and we've got to be careful not to order our sublists as we go. So C is next, so C is going to go on the leftmost entry. We then have B, and then S, W, N, L. And this is our position after the first pass. We know E is now in the correct place, and we have made 7 comparisons. We compared H, C, B, S, W, N, L, all with E. We made 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 swaps because 5 letters, actually no, so we've made 2 swaps because 2 letters have gone from being on the left to on the right. Counting swaps for quicksort is a little bit harder than for bubble sort, so you tend not to need to do it. But with quicksort, like bubble sort, you can see that for 8 elements, we made 7 comparisons on our first pass. That is consistent. Okay, it's always n-1. From there, though, it becomes more difficult to just see how many you're going to do. Potentially more difficult. For this one, not so much. So, that's after the first pass. This is our ordering. So now we repeat the process. This is our first sublist. It's got 2 elements in. So our middle is here. So we pick to the middle and right as our pivot. So we can see CB. Well, B's our pivot. We know B's going to be in there because there's only 2 elements in that list. So let's just go ahead and write those down. Now in this sublist, H, S, W, N, L, we've got 5 elements, so we directly pick the middle one because there's an odd number. And we can see that W is going to go right on the end. And everything else is going to fit in there. So now we have 3 elements that we know are in the right place. So we repeat the process. And you just keep going with all the sublists you've got. Now, the interesting thing with this sublist, with the C in, is that's the only element there. We know it's in the right place because there's nowhere to sort it, there's nowhere to compare. But we still have to consider it as a pivot and then treat it in exactly the same way, just we don't do anything with it. Now this one, more so than the bubble sort, keeping your columns helps the layout be really nice and clean. So we can see here, we've got 4 elements in our list. We pick to the right of middle, and we sort around that. We've got the N there. H comes first, then L, then S. And we've completed 3 passes. So we need to keep going. So once at this point, I tend to, you don't need to, but I tend to always write the old pivots down first, because you're going to have to write them down anyway, so you may as well have them written down. So again, we've got 2 elements here. We choose to the right of the middle. And then we've got 1 on its own. So we go there. Now at this point, we can see that the list is in order. We could see that it was in order after pass 3, but we had to finish the algorithm. So notice this step 6 here. When all items have been chosen as pivots, stop. So we choose the H as a pivot. We know there's nothing to sort with it. It's on its own. So we just write out the list in order. And that's the quick sort done. Now, much like bubble sort, the maximum number of comparisons for the quick sort is the same. And that's a half n minus 1. So again, when we look at order of algorithms in a future video, we can use that formula to work out the order. But that's the quick sort. Key points with this one, again, if the even number of elements, you have to pick to the right of the middle, and then you've got to keep the elements in order in their sublist. Okay, don't try and order them in your head as you go, because otherwise you'll get it wrong. Okay, so be careful with that. But much like all algorithm questions is, once you have the method down, it is just replicating the method. And in this case, the method is just a little bit more complicated than that for bubble sort. But that's quick sort, and thank you for watching.